Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
All right, welcome to our first episode. I am so excited to be with our listeners today, and I have several people with me. So first, I have Daria Lorio-Barsten. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And I have Daniel Irwin.
Hello.
And I have our producer, Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hello there.
All right, and I'm Selena Layden. So we are going to talk to you a little bit today about behavior and schools and all things that are encompassing of that. But since it's our first episode, I want to take just a second and provide a little introduction to who we are. So Daria, do you want to go first and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Why do I have to go first, Selena? But that's all
Because
right.
you're there on my.
No, that's all right. That's okay. I'm happy to go. So I am Daria Lorio-Barsten. I am currently a project specialist at the Training and Technical Assistance Center at William and Mary. And I have 20 years of experience working in the school systems, which does not even seem like the math adds up given my age, but
Well, you're like 27, so you're right.
that's right. I started when I was 7. I started as a baby, wonder baby. So in my previous walks of life, I apparently tried to have as many different job titles within K through 12 system as I could. I started out as a special education teacher in a self-contained classroom in Jackson, Mississippi, and it was one of the best adventures of my life. I had really wonderful kiddos that I taught, and they taught me a lot of great lessons about what to do and potentially more lessons about what not to do when you're a teacher. So, we learn from our experiences. So among other things, I was a general education teacher. I was a testing coordinator. I was an instructional specialist for the Department of Special Education before transitioning to TTAC. I also have the privilege of adjuncting courses on classroom management now and then. And I am a board certified behavior analyst. So that is 20 years of my life in really short summary, but I am really excited to share things that have gone well in my profession and things that I should encourage people not to do so they can learn from my mistakes.
Great, thank you. Daniel.
Hey, yeah, I'm Daniel Irwin, and my heart rate went up as soon as the thing said we are now recording, or this is being recorded. So I'm trying to bring myself down through some strategies. But yeah, I also, Daria, have been in the field for 20 years, which I guess makes us the Doogie Howsers of applied behavior analysis. I currently work for Virginia Commonwealth University's Research Rehabilitation and Training Center. Rehabilitation Research and Training Center. Yep. And they're Autism Center for Education. Prior to that, I was a BCBA in a school division, and kind of like Daria, I've had a variety of roles from IA in a private day school, where I got my teaching certificate or license, got my BCABA while I was there as well, helped start some programs there, started with early childhood, but helped get their school age program up and running, as well as their transition age program for individuals with autism. I worked in a public school division supporting teachers, sort of as an autism mentor teacher. That's where I got my BCBA. And then I spent some time at the Department of Education as the Autism Assistive Technology and Intellectual Disability Specialist, but really missed being in schools and being around students and teachers and doing the work of coaching and that kind of thing. So here we are now doing that. And I too am excited to talk about some of the fun adventures that have been had along the way and how they work, and the things we're seeing in schools and what works, what doesn't, and have some fun.
Yeah, great. So a little bit about me. I've I haven't been in the field quite 20 years. I'm just a couple years shy of you all. 17 when I added it up, that I've been in education. I am a certified special ed teacher. I have my admin endorsement. I have worked in a couple different school districts as an autism coordinator, as a special ed instructional specialist, and then I worked at where Daniel actually works at the Autism Center for a while, doing training and technical assistance across our entire state. And now I am a faculty member at Old Dominion University, where I do a lot of research and writing and teaching and all those fun things. I also run our Virginia Public Schools Behavior Analyst Network and the Cooperative for Effective Behavior Intervention and Support through my role here at ODU. I've been a BCBA for 18 years, though. I think I beat both of you on the BCBA, not on the education, but a little bit longer on that. I should also mention that Daniel and Daria and I have known each other for a really long time and have probably actually been colleagues for almost as long as we've been in education.
Probably
So
40, 42 years. Yep.
yeah, something like that. um,
No,
so
we lost all the math teachers who tuned into this podcast because math is not adding up here, friends.
It's all right. We've known each other a long time. We've been in the field a long time. And I think it's important because we've had a lot of really good and a lot of maybe not as strong experiences in education. And so part of the point of the podcast is to talk about those and to talk about lessons we've learned over the years, lessons that we can hopefully bring to our listeners, and hopefully be of some help. So I want to start out by also just kind of starting with a fun question for you all. In all your time that you've been in school, what is either your favorite or the most random thing that you've seen a teacher teach or that you've heard a kid say they've learned in school? I don't know who wants to start, but something that is just makes you smile when you hear a kid talk about it.
I'll start because
Awesome.
well, I have two, and one is from my own child, and she came home in like kindergarten or first grade and spelled the word chrysanthemum, and I was like, well, this I'm quickly being outmatched because I looked at it and I knew it was right, but I could not right now even tell you how to spell chrysanthemum. So it stands out in my mind that happened. The second one was a kid that I worked with early on, and we were doing it was sort of that match point name system of identifying things. It was community places in Richmond. There's a restaurant called Bandito's Burrito Lounge, and that was one of his community locations. And just the way you come into this job like as an IA, it was my first teaching experience. There were people who were setting up programs, doing really wonderful things, and you can sort of walk in and you work with this kid, and there's a picture of Banditos, and he's naming it. He's saying it in the cutest voice you maybe have ever heard. But it just stands out. I can still hear his voice saying Banditos, and it just makes me laugh. It's such a random thing, but all part of his experience.
So the real question is, did he eat at Banditos though, or did
See, I don't think so. And we can talk about the social validity of teaching him that another time. But here we are.
All right, Daria, do you have one you want to share?
So I'm sitting here and wondering and actually sweating slightly, thinking about what have I unintentionally taught the students that I have taught throughout the career, right? And I remember this moment where it's just things that kids pick up and they learn whether you directly taught them or not. But for some reason, the thing that popped into my head was so I think it's very obvious to everybody who's listening that English is not my first language, right? The accent is there. It gets thicker when I get excited. So this will be really fun for all of us. But as I have gone through the process of becoming a US citizen, right before my ceremony, I was teaching fifth grade. And so my students were really excited for me. They knew that I was going to be out and that we were going to have a substitute. And I had one fifth grader who got, as the day progressed, he just got more and more sad, which was not typical for this kiddo. And so I checked in with him and I said, "Hey friend, what's going on? I can't help but notice that you're just feeling a little glum." And he said to me, "Well, Miss Lorio," at the time I was just Miss Lorio, "Well, Miss Lorio, I'm just having a really hard time with you becoming a citizen." And I thought, oh boy, this is like a political discussion trap about immigration and all sorts of things, right? And so I censored all those thoughts. I kept them as my thinking thoughts. And I said, well, tell me more about what do you mean by that? And he very sweetly said, I just like your accent so much. And I don't want you to not have it tomorrow. And I just had to chuckle and reassure him that whether I wanted to or not, whether he wanted to or not, my accent was not going to be left at the door of the naturalization ceremony, right? That I would still talk the same way that I talked, but it just made me chuckle because these are the things that my kiddos were learning about the process of becoming a citizen. And I think they got a really early civics lesson before the curriculum spiraled to that part. But it just made me think and wonder and giggle about the things that they pick up or assumptions that they make connected to what we think we teach them. So,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I have three, but they're pretty short. One of them is I'm a sucker for a good random fact. Like I just love learning really random things. And I have two children. Both of them had the same first grade teacher. They're a little bit older now. But her favorite thing was to say, fun fact. And then my kids started picking up that, and so they'd come home and be like, "Fun fact," and I was like, "Oh, here it comes from from the teacher." And so my oldest came home one day and it was like, "Mom, I have a fun fact." I'm like, "I'm ready," and he goes, "Do you know that turkeys can show you when they're scared?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "So like they run away?" He's like, "No, no, no, they don't run away from you." He's like, "You know the wobble thing that's under their neck?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "It turns blue when they're scared." I was like, I had no idea. I still don't know if this is actually true, but I thought it was kind of a random fact that he learned.
Emily, can you look that up for us?
Yeah, fact check us as we go, please. We don't want to spread misinformation, but um the second one, so my youngest, when he started school, he'd already been in preschool at the school where he attends. So he knew where things were in the school. He knew a lot of the staff. He had like kind of the basics of school down already. So he gets off the bus after his first day of kindergarten, and I was like, "Hey, how did it go?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Mom, we got to rethink this kindergarten thing. I already know all of this stuff, and I think we need to move on." I was like, "We learned it all. Day one, we're done."
Another Doogie Howser in the mix. Terrific.
Yeah. But my favorite one, and this is this is actually the inspiration for the question today for me. When my oldest started kindergarten, and he unfortunately started during COVID, so we started virtual and all these things. So he didn't end up going to kindergarten until after Thanksgiving that year. So he gets off the bus his first day. I was like, "Hey, buddy, how'd it go?" And he's like, "It was good." And I'm like, "What did you learn today?" And he's like, "Mom, I learned the best thing." I'm like, "Really? What did you learn?" "I learned what a spork is." And I was like, "Oh, awesome. Public education is going to serve us really well right now." So, yes,
listen, don't knock sporks. They're incredibly useful.
they
In
are.
times of need, they're there for you. So, I feel like all of these unintended lessons that children pick up show up with some necessity at some point of time in their lives.
I think they're really important lessons. And I think that honestly, like all joking aside, I think there's lots of things we teach kids, whether we mean to or don't mean to, but that can serve them really well in life. And I actually, in a weird roundabout way, think this kind of brings us to our topic today, our main topic, the topic we're actually going to talk about today. Because it's our first episode, we kind of wanted to lay some foundation to make sure that we all have some common language. We all kind of know what we're talking about and where we're going with this. And so I want to start out with a really basic question, but the question is, what is behavior? So we had a lot of conversation about this. And because of what we do, and I think we mentioned we're all behavior analysts, we title our episode, Daniel, do you want to say the title?
We're going to call it Three Behavior Analysts Walk Into a School.
Yes. So 3 behavior analysts walk into school, and we're those 3 behavior analysts. We've been working in schools for a long time. And I think it's really important to understand because we come from a very specific perspective on what behavior is and how behavior works. So now the real question that I go back to is, what is behavior?
So I remember from the BCBA program that my favorite definition was behavior is anything that a dead man cannot do, right? But I have to say, I was a teacher first before I became a BCBA. And so I feel like my teacher definition would have been it's stuff kids and adults do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think just a really simplistic definition that I use when I teach this, and both to educators and aspiring behavior analysts, is behavior is anything we say or do. Now, behavior is actually much more complicated than that, and it's all encompassing of a lot of other things, but I think it's a really nice, easy definition to use of it's just anything we say or do. So if that's, and I think that plays into both of your definitions, Daria, this idea of it's just stuff kids do, it's stuff adults do. And I love that it's both kids and adults because we all engage in behavior, right? So, what are some examples of behavior that come to your mind?
Anything we say or do.
Some tangible examples. Like, what are some things that you've seen people do that are behavior?
I mean, from a very simple walking, talking.
Daniel making wisecracks is a behavior.
We would have to define that, but yes,
Yeah,
yes.
please be more specific. And I think if we're talking about schools, we're talking about, I mean, again, it's anything any kid does, and we're thinking about the context of school. So it could be completing math assignments. It could be, and we could break that down into the student is doing school, they're arriving, they're walking to class, they're engaging in the routines, they're doing those things that are helping them be successful. And we could sort of just on any one of those aspects kind of narrow it down to really discrete individual kinds of things like carrying the one on an individual math problem when it's 8 + 8 you've got to carry the whatever or some of those things that might be more challenging, right? Some of those things that might be interfering in a classroom, or those things that are making them really successful socially. How are they engaging with their peers and talking to them and using language in a way that's helping them be successful? So I think we're going to talk about all those things as we kind of go through and think through some of those examples. And I think one of the neatest things that I've encountered as we talk about behavior, and I work with teachers to help improve student behavior and really think whether it's academic or social, or it's those activities of daily living and routines and communication and all of that, is really helping that narrowing process, that specificity of what is it that I'm looking for from the student and how can I be really specific about that and know when I'm seeing it and other people can know when they're seeing it. And sort of taking that approach of if we're not seeing it, how are we getting closer to it? So all that to say, it's infinite.
Yeah, there are tons and tons of examples of what behavior is, right? And I really appreciate that you kind of brought up a couple pieces because I think, and this is why we wanted to start with this. I think when we think about behavior, oftentimes we think about behavior we don't want to see. The hitting, the kicking, the running out of class, the saying words that we don't want to hear, those kinds of things. And those are behavior. But there's a lot of other behavior too. Completing math problems, reading, playing tag on the playground. Those are all examples of behavior as well. Daria, I think you were going to add something.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I appreciate Daniel's examples, and Selena, I appreciate how you framed it as well. I also think it's important for us to think about behavior in kind of terms of, yes, it's applicable for kids, and usually in schools, that's what we focus on, right? We focus on the outcome for students because that's the bottom line for all of us. But we also have to think about behavior is all around. I mean, it also includes adults. It also includes our colleagues. It includes ourselves and thinking through why we do the things that we do, right? I think about collaborating with professionals in the schools and sometimes having to navigate some challenging behaviors there, or sometimes witnessing really wonderful collaborative behaviors in that sense. I think about when we support our students and try to help them generalize their skills across a variety of settings. I think anytime we deal with people, including families, caretakers, behavior comes into play there as well. So I think it's important note that I do want to make to folks who are joining us for these adventures is to recognize that when we talk about behavior, while we may talk about kid behavior, really these conversations are more global. And so when you understand the principles of behavior and when you understand the science of behavior, you're able to improve practices, not just with kids that you teach, but if you are a parent, these are the same relevant science applies to the way we parent our kiddos, right? The same science applies to kind of the organizational management and collaboration with the colleagues. And I can just keep on and on with examples. But I did want to bring up the point that behavior is behavior for any human organism. And so it's an important point that I don't want to get lost as we focus just on the student behaviors at times, because schools are systems that require all of us to work collaboratively, right? So all of us are behaving in one way or the other.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. And I think partially because as we start to talk about how do we help improve or to promote pro-social behavior, we have to think about our own behavior, right? That's not just on the student. We got to think about our adult behavior. Before we dive too much deeper into that, though, I want to do one more thing around defining what behavior is and talk about some non-examples of behavior. So if we're saying behavior is pretty all-encompassing, what are some things that are not behavior?
Emotions are
Absolutely.
not behavior. Describing a student as angry is maybe a valid way to talk about an emotion they may be feeling or how we might categorize what they're feeling. But we do that through identifying what those behaviors are that let us know. So maybe it's the student telling us, or engaging in behaviors that we've seen that would typically elicit some sort of emotional response from most. So that's one of the things I try to work on a lot with teachers is really tell me more about what that looks like. What does it sound like? What are we seeing? What are we able to sort of observe when the student is quote unquote angry or happy or attending, learning, right? What do those things look like for the student so that we can look for more or less of that moving forward?
Yeah, and I think one of the key factors that's really important to that is we have to be careful about our assumptions, and emotions are a really good example of this. So saying like the student's angry, if the student told you they're angry, sure, but if the student didn't tell you that, we have to be really careful that we don't make that assumption because I know there are times that I may feel one way, but my behavior would not suggest that that may be how I'm feeling. So I might be really angry about something, but I'm in a setting where it would be unprofessional or inappropriate to display what that behavior to display behavior that would be congruent with that emotion. And so I may still sit there and smile or have my stoic face, but that's not necessarily how I'm feeling. Likewise, there are times where I might have a smile on my face, but I'm sad, but I'm not displaying behaviors that may be congruent with what that emotion could be. And so we need to be really cautious about making assumptions about emotions. And you are right, emotions are not behavior. They are something different. Any other examples that we want to talk about or non-examples of behavior we want to talk about? Daniel brought up another one that I think is really important, and particularly as we're in schools, is learning or understanding. I think are two words. I'm using air quotes that our listeners can't see, but while it's funny because we measure learning, right? Like that is a big part of what we do in schools is we want to know how much did you learn in any given time period. But we actually can't observe learning, which is counterintuitive a little bit, but what we're actually observing is the byproduct of learning. And so, for example, if we want to know how many, did the student learn their multiplication facts? One way we do that is we ask them multiplication questions and we see how many they get right. And we assume that if they're getting them all right, they probably have learned multiplication. But, in theory, you could get them right by luck, by guessing, right? If someone's like, hey, what's 2 + 2? And they're like, I don't know, 4. do they know it or do they not? And so the more examples we have of it, the more confident we can be that the learning has probably occurred, but we can't directly observe learning, which brings me to the 3 conditions for behavior. It has to be specific, and Daniel talked about that already. It has to be observable. We have to be able to see it, and it has to be measurable. There has to be some way to count it. How often did it happen? How long did it happen? How many right did they get? Those kinds of things. So this is actually leading into a comment that Daria brought up already that I want to go back to because she teased it and then we didn't talk about it, which is the science of behavior. And I think it's really important, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the science of behavior, but ultimately, for a quick reference here, the science of behavior is that there is science behind a lot of what we're talking about. There's a ton of research around behavior. We have principles of behavior. It's not something that Daria and Daniel and I just decided to make up one day, or it's not just our opinions. I don't know if you all want to say any more about that.
Yeah, there's something that you brought up. Sorry, I saw you were getting ready to talk, Daria. There's like when you were talking about learning and you were talking about how we define learning. I think a lot of times, and I have no data to back this up, except my personal experience. When we look at a curriculum, there's words like understand and know, like we're building knowledge, right? And so when we're working in classrooms and which I think is okay, I think that's fine for a broad curriculum, right? We can identify all kinds of different ways that kids can let us know that they understand the 4 different types of rock. 4 of them, I looked it up: igneous, sedimentary. Oh, 3 of them metamorphic. It's been a while. I'm not a geologist. But there's all kinds of different ways, and it's built into the curriculum, all of that. When we start thinking about individual goals and understanding how students, if it's an IEP goal, that they will understand igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock.
Fun fact for the day, by the way. That is the fun fact, is now we know the 3 types of rocks.
Oh, we have to start thinking more critically, and I think this is where we get into some wishy-washy areas in supporting kids with IEPs, is really making sure that we're specific about how they're going to demonstrate that knowledge, especially for kids with communication disabilities and who maybe present information in ways that are different than other students. We really have to think about how we're writing goals that are behavioral, even if they're academic goals, so that we can see and measure and say, yes, this kid is able to name them. This kid is able to describe them, right? Like provide a definition for, sort different rocks into the different kinds of categories, right? So we're starting to look at these things we can see happen as opposed to this general concept of understanding.
To that point, right? And less thinking about rocks and more just kind of thinking about what else do we want to know about behavior. I think we need to talk a little bit about covert behavior, the behavior that is not easily seen, um, but is experienced by people and can be measured, right? But I do think that that is something where it gets a little bit tricky for sometimes for us to have a lot of these conversations about behaviors, because the science of behavior makes sense to us. We all love it, but it is incredibly complex. Selena and Daniel, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about what do we do with covert behaviors, because I think when you are a teacher, and I completely agree, emotion is not the behavior, right? But there are certain responses associated that kind of come out of experiencing an emotion that we might not be able to see, or if a third person came in to do a classroom observation and take frequency data, they might miss it, but that doesn't mean that that behavior is not occurring. So can we take a moment to chat about private events and covert behavior, or do we want to talk about it at a later time?
So I think now that you've brought it up, I don't think we can completely ignore it. But I also will say, like, I think that's another like 6 episodes, because you're right, it is incredibly complex, and it is not, even when I teach students who are in our behavior analysis program, this is not our first night conversation, right? This is a conversation way down the line. So I don't want our listeners to get too bogged down. But Covert behavior absolutely exists. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have all of these things, right? And thinking a thought is a behavior. The challenge with covert behavior and with private events, which is what we call them, is we can't observe those directly. So you can observe your own covert behavior, you can observe your own private events, but because of the inaccessibility of someone's brain and how it's working, we can't have any kind of reliability on that. So we have to rely on things like self-report. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we want to make sure that we're looking at other ways to help confirm what we're hearing, because unfortunately, we are not also always our most reliable source of information. And sometimes that's because we can't give words to our own thoughts and feelings and biological states. Or it may be that we don't want to be honest about our own thoughts and feelings and biological states for a variety of totally valid reasons. I don't share every thought in my brain out of my mouth. And in fact, that is a very desired behavior, that we don't share every thought in our brain out of our mouth. Those are thinking thoughts and our speaking thoughts. So yes, absolutely exist, absolutely are valid. But
and absolutely influence
yes,
behavior.
yep,
Right. Like that's, yeah.
yep. But for our purposes at this exact moment, we're going to stick with our initial definition of behavior is what we say and do, because again, we can observe it, we can measure it, and we can be specific with it.
I do look forward to those 6 additional episodes in which we talk about this.
Yes. With that, I want to bring up what I actually think is the most important question of today, which is, why should educators care about what we're talking about? Like, why should educators care about behavior?
Oh my goodness, we spend enough time dealing with it, right? And addressing and responding to it and planning for it and all those things. And if I could time travel and go back to my first year of teaching and say, oh, self, do I have a much easier way to do the things? I certainly would do that. And so I think by understanding the science of behavior, understanding how things work, and more importantly, why they work the way that they work, it makes us be so much more effective and efficient in our craft of teaching, right? And so I think about how much time we spend responding to students' behavior and time we spend responding to adult behavior in our lives as well. And I think about, if you have the evidence base behind the strategies, and if you have the understanding of the science of behavior, you're positioning yourself to have potentially an easier job, right? Not to say that teaching is an easy job. It absolutely is not. It is one of my favorite things to do and one of the hardest things that I have ever done. But I think understanding that science of the behavior helps us be as effective for our students as we can.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Daria. I think, obviously, as teachers, as educators, we want to see our students be successful outside of the classroom. So that may be next year, that may be over the summer, that may be into adulthood. And what is going to help them be successful is to have a set of behaviors that allows them to adapt to new environments, to continue to learn new skills, to continue to develop relationships. Like there's this just infinite, it's infinite reason that we might look at helping students develop more contextually appropriate behavior, or strengthen communication skills or writing skills based on the job they want, how they want to live, et cetera, et cetera. I think the other part of this is, and Daria, I think you're kind of maybe saying the same thing that you were. It's when we can start really understanding some of these behavioral ideas, what makes behavior work, what makes people tick, those processes and that kind of thing. It helps us as educators and generally as people to understand more about why we're doing what we're doing, and to build some processes around that. And I think from a reflective standpoint and thinking about practice and thinking about how to improve what we're doing on an ongoing basis is really to think as objectively as possible about what it is we're doing and how we're influencing the environment around us that's either making people successful or not. And back to that circle of control, what can I do to make this a more conducive environment? What can I do to make this a more effective environment? What can I do to change to make this work better? And so it's sort of that constant reflection of our own beliefs and behaviors, and how that can influence the people around us.
And I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I have always experienced that sense of urgency in my classrooms, right? I always have thought about the amount of time that I had to spend engaging with my kiddos, with my students, is really limited. We are gifted only a short amount of time to be with our students and to influence them during the course of their lives, right? Whether you are a secondary teacher and you see your kiddos for a block at a time, whether you are an elementary teacher, you might have a little bit more time with them, but you still generally have them only for a year. If you're a special education teacher, you might see them for a whole day or for only small parts of the day. And I think about how important it is for us to use that time to maximize the learning that is happening, right? To maximize all the acceleration of learning that we can do, to teach them to the best of our ability. And I think without the science of the behavior, we spend so much time on other things that it takes away from that ability to make sure that we are focusing on their learning and again maximizing and optimizing our time together. And I'm not talking about just instructionally, I'm talking about helping kids grow with their social skills and helping kids learn how to regulate their emotions, all of those parts. But I just think it's really important for us to think through how can we use the very limited time that we are gifted with our students to the best of our ability.
I think that says it, to be honest. I think that kind of brings us to the end of our main topic. I think this is a good start to a conversation. There's going to be a lot more conversation. We're going to break a lot of this down into much smaller, manageable parts, focusing on the how, the why, the good, the bad, and everything in between. One thing that we really want to do is we know that you listen to a podcast and that's great, but we really want to extend and provide some additional resources and supports and things that you can do. And so these aren't paid. We're not sponsored for this. These are just things that we like or we find useful that we hope others may find useful as well. And so, Daria, I'm going to ask you to share our resource commercial of the day.
All right. So, fun fact to wrap up our first time together is there. I wanted to talk about the set of modules, and I really love resources that I can use in real time that have been given to me in bite-sized amounts, right? So I love me a good research study. I really appreciate sitting down with a cup of tea and really delving into it. But I also know that when I'm in the classroom, I don't necessarily have time for that. So the resource that I wanted to share with our listeners today comes from Old Dominion University, actually. It comes from the Center for Implementation and Evaluation of Educational Systems. And that's a really big title for a center, but they focus on improving all practices within K through 12 educational system, right? So they kind of focus on the comprehensive improvement. And so they have designed a set of very short modules to target and focus on classroom management and identified some of common challenges that teachers might encounter in their setting. What I love about these modules is that they're all really short. They're about 2 minutes long, 3 minutes long, and they are not, they use the science of behavior as the foundational piece, but they don't necessarily use all sorts of technical language. So they're really easy to digest. So if you have had a full day in the classroom and then you graded papers for a couple of hours and then you did all the other things that teachers do and your cognitive load feels really heavy, this resource is still much more manageable. So it's a set of 11 different modules. They are broken up and organized into elementary setting and secondary setting, which I find to be really helpful because while the principles are the same, we know that those two contexts are pretty different. And so I appreciate that they have honored and acknowledged that. And you can find anything from anger management to what a behavior intervention plan is, to what is PBIS or positive behavior interventions and supports, to how do you make sure that classroom rules and expectations are really effective for you and your students in building the community. And so I think it's a great resource for anybody who is interested in kind of checking another opinion that happens to be founded in evidence-based practices, and it has a ton of research and science behind it in a kind of executive summary way. So if you are in a school, if you are an educational system, or if you're just curious about classroom management and behavior in that context in general, I think that's a really helpful resource. So Emily, thank you for putting that and adding it into the show's notes. We really, really appreciate it.
I think that actually takes us to the end. I think we're at the end. No, I thank you so much, everybody, today for the conversation. I think it's been a really good start. We're going to take a lot of these topics. We're going to break them down. We're going to walk through the how, the why, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything between. So I hope that you'll join us again. And before we end, we had our fact checker check us. So I'm going to ask our producer to give us the results of our fact check.
Okay, so I can confirm that turkey waddles do turn blue. That is a fact. That is a confirmed fact.
There we go. Now we know. And I'm glad we didn't lie about it. So I'm glad it was right today. So, all right. With that, thank you so much to our listeners, and thank you to our group today. And we will see you on our next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cibis@odu.edu, visiting www.cibisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CIBISVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.